A few years ago, Nissan whipped the covers off a more off-road friendly variant of the Navara, the Warrior. And this Warrior was built in partnership with Premcar, which is formerly FPV, and each ute was converted right here on Australian soil. But if we fast forward to present day, Nissan and Premcar's relationship is still as strong as ever, and we're now onto the second iteration of the Warrior. Starting at around $68,000 before on-road costs are added, the Navara Pro 4X Warrior isn't exactly cheap. So Nissan Australia have added a new option in the form of this Navara SL Warrior, which is about $10,000 cheaper before on-road costs are added, but still comes with a heap of off-road goodies. So while the Pro 4X Warrior commands about a $10,000 premium over this SL, it's also worth noting that this SL Warrior commands an $11,000 premium over the standard Navara SL Ute on which it's based. But before we dive into whether or not all these off-road goodies are worth it for that premium, let's take a look at the three best and the three not so good aspects of it. The first thing I want to talk about is this bull bar, because as you've probably noticed, unlike the Pro 4X Warrior, which just makes do with the lower portion, this one actually gets a hooped bull bar, which gives it a more tough aesthetic. But not only that, this is winch compatible and even comes with an integrated LED light bar. Secondly, I want to talk about these Cooper all-terrain tyres that come standard across the Warrior range, because not only are they great off-road and on-road, and they actually have a decent amount of grip on the tarmac, but they also add a decent amount of extra sidewall over the standard tyres, which improves the ride. But lastly, I want to talk about the SL Warrior offering as a whole, because it's not very common in this part of the world that importers take the lowest possible spec of a ute and give it all the off-road goodies and create a ute that's great on and off the tarmac that comes at a decent price. I mean, good on you, Nissan Australia. This is such a cool idea. But then again, the flip side of the coin when it comes to basing an off-road ute on the entry-level model means that you miss out on a lot of the niceties that come standard on that range-topping Pro 4X Warrior. Examples include no keyless entry, so you're going to have to boop the button every time you want to get in or use the old-fashioned key. And then on the inside, you're going to have to actually use this bad boy to twist and start. There's no start-stop button either. And lastly, this Warrior here, it's an automatic model, which commands a $2,000 premium over the manual. But to be honest, if I was going for one of these, a base spec off-road ute, I think I'd be opting for 3 pedals because it just seems like a more fun package. Now in terms of the off-road additions that you do get for that $11,000 premium over the standard Navara SL, we've got this bull bar that I spoke about before, but underneath here you get a Navara branded bash plate, helps keeps rocks away from the good parts of the car. It also shares the same fender flares as what you'd find on the Pro 4X Warrior. It gets the Cooper all-terrain tyres that measure 275 wide, 17-inch alloy wheels, and then under here, you can't really see it, but there's red springs, kind of cool, and it's also retuned suspension that lifts the ride height by 40 millimeters, increasing it in total to 260 millimeters. And then back here, you don't get that same sports bar that comes as standard on the Pro 4X Warrior, but what you do get are these decals here, which I don't love, and I'd probably be taking them off. So when it comes to the interior of this SL Warrior, things are quite basic, but I mean, it's what you'd expect from the entry-level ute. Soft touch materials are almost non-existent. I mean, you've got some fabric here, but everything else is hard plastic. But I mean, that hints at the kind of workhorse nature of what this ute really is. The seats, they're nice, they're comfortable, they do their job. The driver's seat here, you've got electric adjustability. The passenger has to make do with manual adjustability, but again, what you'd expect from an entry-level ute. In terms of space and practicality here, plenty of head and leg room across the front row, but that's something we've come to expect from a dual cab ute. Door bins, reasonably practical, big water bottle, other things you want to put down there. You don't get a wireless charger, but no one's really expecting that. You get a USB-C A port here, a 3.5mm auxiliary port, which is kind of a throwback of cars of old. There's a 12-volt power outlet here, also one in the center console, as well as a USB-C A and a USB-C port. When it comes to climate control, it's not as much climate control as it's just a good old-fashioned air conditioning system, because you've got a dial here for hot and cold air, you've got how fast you want your fans to be, and then where you want that air to go. Basic, but it works. In terms of cabin technology, things are basic, but I mean, what would you expect from an entry-level ute? You get an analog gauge cluster here with good old-fashioned dials that go like that. There is a digital display in the middle that will show you things like your fuel economy, etc. Here, there's an 8-inch touchscreen infotainment display. It has Android Auto and Apple CarPlay capabilities, but you're going to need to plug your phone in for that. But the good thing, there's buttons on both sides, so it's just like the old days. And then carrying on this theme of good old-fashioned buttons that you can push is this multi-function steering wheel that I mean, it is very basic, but everything's where you'd want it to be and great to use. Back here in the second row, the basic theme continues with exactly the same cloth seats. You do get rubber floor mats, which I should have talked about in the front because that's an aspect that I really like about the Warrior, and I feel like not enough off-road ready vehicles supply rubber floor mats because you're always traipsing mud through the carpet, so good job, Nissan. And then again, you'll find the same hard touch plastics almost everywhere, apart from this nice little fabric armrest, which is a nice cushion for your arm. In terms of space in the second row, the Navara isn't overly generous, but it's kind of what we've come to expect from the dual cab ute segment. Headroom, not a heap. Legroom, not a heap. And in terms of this very upright backrest, it's slightly uncomfortable, and I mean, because there's a hard wall right here, you're not going to be able to adjust it at all. And then on the amenities front back here, you get fan speed control for the air conditioning, you get a USB-C A charging port, and then armrest gets a couple of cup holders. Now when it comes to capacities with the SL Warrior, despite the fact that Premcar has retuned the suspension to offer a softer ride and make it better off-road, this Navara has retained its 1 tonne payload capacity up here. Then when it comes to towing, it's also retained its 3.5 tonne capacity. And this SL Warrior also comes standard with a tow bar. And finally, it's worth noting that this SL Warrior, like the true off-road Warrior that it is, comes as standard with a full-size spare wheel underneath the tray. So when you're off in the back and beyond off-roading and you get a flat, you can be rest assured knowing that you can just slap a new wheel on there and be on your merry way. Now, Nissan claims a fuel economy figure of 7.6 litres per 100 kilometres when it comes to this SL Warrior here. On the road, the best that we could achieve was 8.4 litres per 100 kilometres, which isn't quite at Nissan's claim, but then again, isn't bad for a ute of this size, especially considering that it rides on those meaty all-terrain tyres. Nissan Australia offers a capped price plan for the Navara SL Warrior, which costs $2,860 and covers a ute up to 5 years, with service intervals being every 20,000 kilometres. And then on the warranty front, it's worth noting that Premcar's conversion is included in Nissan Australia's warranty that covers the Navara up to 5 years. Over the last 12 months, the median budget direct customer paid $1,179 to comprehensively insure their new Nissan Navara. Your premium may vary based on things that insurers take into account, such as your age, driving history, where you live, and whether or not you garage the car. By the sound and feel of this Nissan Navara SL Warrior, I mean, there's no denying that it's a good old-fashioned workhorse ute on the road. It's a diesel, it sounds grunty, it sounds a bit sluggish, but hey, it's what you'd expect. So up front there, under the bonnet, sits the same 2.3 litre twin-turbo diesel engine as the standard Navara. And just like the standard Navara, it gets 140 kilowatts and 450 Newton meters of torque. Now these Warriors, I mean, as you'd expect, are big off-road machines. They only come in four-wheel drive guys. This one here has a 7-speed automatic, and I just don't love the pairing with that diesel engine. It kind of makes the engine feel like it's a little overworked, which is never a good thing. And putting it into the manual shift mode, I say manual, it's like one of the most unresponsive manual modes I've tried, so wouldn't recommend, hence why I'd much prefer a manual one. But again, I understand why you off-road folk like automatics for your climbing uphill sort of things. But in saying that, the engine, it's still a ute engine, it's still a torque monster. I mean, it doesn't feel overly fast, but it feels like it's capable, it feels like it can pull a lot of stuff. Nissan hasn't actually given a 0 to 100 figure for this SL Warrior, but I'd be surprised if it's underneath the 10-second mark. In terms of the ride, it's actually quite pleasant for a ute. Premcar did retune the suspension and have changed a few aspects of it, and you do notice that on the road more than anything. There's not that harsh nature of the back wheels when you're in a regular ute. Over rough roads, it still isn't great. Like, I mean, there's no denying that it's a ute, but I don't know, I'm impressed. It's not to the level of something like a Ford Raptor that kind of just floats over with its fancy Baja Fox suspension, but it definitely is a step up from your bog standard ute. Another impressive aspect of it is the fact that it does come with slightly softer suspension, but you still get that 1 tonne payload in the tray and that 3.5 tonne towing capacity off the tow bar. So, I mean, it's a good job all round on that front. You wouldn't be calling this Navara SL Warrior a driver's car on the road at least though, because in terms of the steering feedback and feel, I mean, it's sort of non-existent. There's almost a worrying lack of feel at the center of the steering because there's just this quite large dead zone right here. And then when traction does break loose, which is actually quite hard to do, which is a surprise given the all-terrain nature of these tyres, nothing is really communicated through the steering wheel, so I don't love it. But then again, it's not meant to be a driver's car on the road. This is a big off-roader, so all this is detrimental on the tarmac, but on the dirt, it's where you really notice its positives. I've said it before and I'll say it again, I am genuinely impressed by these Cooper all-terrain tyres. The kind of benchmark I have for an off-road ute on big tyres is the Ford Raptor, and that thing is pretty dismal on the tarmac, especially when you add any hint of water. But these, I mean, they grip up. When you really push them, I mean, you will find their limits quite easily, but as a whole, in normal driving, they won't creep up on you and throw the back end out as that Raptor does, so I'm impressed. But there's no denying that off the tarmac is where this SL Warrior really shines. That retuned suspension, it's a lot softer and it handles corrugation so much nicer off-road. I was going on about 80, sort of 90 k's an hour down a pretty harsh dirt road and I didn't feel out of place, I didn't feel uncomfortable, so I was really impressed. And then when it comes to the more intense sort of slow off-road stuff, the big tyres and that 40mm of extra ground clearance really gives you a confidence to get over those obstacles, and not once did I bottom out, but in saying that I wasn't pushing it too hard, but I felt confident, so I'm happy with it. In terms of safety tech, things are very basic like the rest of this ute. It makes do with standard cruise control, so you don't get adaptive, it won't follow the car in front of you. It misses out on things like lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic assist, but it does get automatic emergency braking, so that's a win. On that same topic, it gets a reversing camera, but no other cameras, and the camera that it does make do with isn't going to win any quality awards anytime soon. So as a whole, there's no denying that this Navara SL Warrior, it's an impressive ute on and off the road. I mean, especially off the tarmac where that new suspension tune goes so well. Is it worth the $11,000 premium over the standard Navara? Well, that's a hard one because it really depends on how hardcore of an off-roader you really are, because for most people, they probably don't need all this. But then again, you miss out on quite a few niceties, and as to whether those niceties are worth that $10,000 premium to make the step up to the Pro 4X Warrior, that's a different question entirely and really depends on what sort of person you are as a driver. But anyway, let me know what you think of this Navara SL Warrior in the comments down below, and while you're down there, be sure to subscribe. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.